Yeah. You're listening to the Wild Die Podcast. 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 Listen 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 to the Wild Die Podcast.
Welcome to the Wild Eye Podcast, episode 103. My name is Eric Lamour, aka No Sleeves McGee, and here are my co-hosts, Carl Kiesler. Hi, Carl.
Hey, what's up, Eric?
It's going. Early Sunday morning, as usual.
Yeah.
We're gathering. And today, no Gary today because he's at Machete Lake with his family, camping, drinking, having fun. So I called someone and replaced him for this episode. Our special guest, Ellen Dalina. She runs the Savage Worlds actual play podcast, Birdhouse Mysteries, and also stars in the CFT RPG Savage Ravenloft. That's on Twitch. So welcome to the show, Ellen.
Thank you. Stars in. You make me sound so fancy.
Well, yeah, you're one of the stars.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you're quite the Savage cheerleader out there on Twitter.
I love it. So I'm trying to convert as many 5e players as possible.
Good. Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
You're going to run a one shot for some of your friends, right?
Yes. Yeah, a bunch of other podcasters.
Awesome.
It's very cool.
It's always good.
Yeah. More Savages, the better. More Savage Worlds players.
Yep.
That's awesome.
So today, the topic, we're going to take it to the edge with a discussion on what goes on in your session 0. So, what is it? Why I do it? What kind of form? So I was just telling the other co-host before the show, for me, session 0, that's a term that I've only recently been aware of. We used to call that making characters. Basically, you get your friends over and make characters. I used to play Rollmaster, and you could spend about 2 sessions of 3 or 4 hours just to make characters. So that was a way to bond and all that. And now for Savage Worlds, especially if you're playing with people that are familiar with the system already, that can be done in, 20 minutes. Even if you have a lot of gear selection and stuff, it's pretty fast. So
Yeah.
basically, what do you do with the rest of the session? What do you discuss? And I like that stuff a lot. And I was telling them that for me, it's basically I ask questions, and maybe because it's mostly online when I do it, and I hear crickets and people just aren't really engaged with it. I get the sense that they just want to play. Let's just play and find out about our characters later and form the bonds and that kind of stuff. So I'm not putting this on them because they're great players, but obviously there's something I'm not doing right, or maybe you two have some good tricks for that. So Ellen, what is a session 0 for you?
For me, it's kind of 2 parts. It's that character creation, background aspect, and I handle that mostly offline. I'm trying to harken back to February when we were doing this. That's the most recent session 0 that I've run. I've been in a session 0 since then. But we got together on Discord and chatted, and I set like expectations for the campaign, some kind of themes. What was everybody comfortable with? What are people not interested in seeing? That sort of thing. And then I'm pretty sure within like 2 days after our session 0, we like jumped into session 1 because we were so excited to play. But our second part of session 0 that I did was a dice rolling little adventure, like tiny baby adventure before session 1 starts and we kick into the real plot. So that's what I do. Just to get go ahead.
So quite simple, not just it's a bit more informal, would you say? Well, it's a mix of both. Yeah,
a mix of both. With the idea behind getting them into the game and playing is 3 out of 4 of my players for the podcast had never played Savage Worlds before. Mm-hmm. So there were a whole lot of rules that they had to actually enact and see happen before they could get in that mindset. Mm-hmm. And so it just kind of helps to work out the kinks. It was helping me too, because this is the first I've GM'd before and I've DM'd other systems and stuff like that, but I have never done anything this scale before. So it kind of helped me get used to them and them get used to me.
Mm-hmm. And also with you being a podcast, there's an audience there. So there's like you were saying, themes. There might be some things you didn't want to get public, although you can actually edit at the end. But was there, because for us, this podcast, we say it's PG-13. We try not to say bad words, and if we do, we bleep them out. So was there any kind of directions like that you gave the players to?
Somebody asked that question. They were like, can we curse? And I was like, sure, you can curse, but not all the time. We're not trying to be a Tarantino movie over here.
Mm-hmm. No N words.
No.
Yeah.
No, definitely not.
Draw the line there.
Not come up.
Yeah. The only white guy that can get away with it, basically. What about you, Carl? What is a session 0?
It's very similar to what Ellen does. We basically start, because I just did 2 of them. I just did one last night and one 2 weeks ago. I'm a player in both of these games, and my friends we're starting new campaigns. So both of them started with not at the session, like sending PDFs and stuff like that, talking about it via text. And we've been talking about it for 2-3 weeks now. And then it comes up to session 0 where we're tinkering around with character ideas. We send each other texts. Like you said, there's other ways to communicate these days. So, and we're doing it. But when we get to session 0, there's still tons of questions that players might have, and the GM wants to set kind of the expectations of the game. Like, make sure all the characters are gelling together. Like, you don't have someone that's a criminal in the game that's wanted major, and then there's a bounty hunter in the same game as a player. That's sure that might happen, but we want to make sure these two aren't button heads constantly throughout the game. So it's a lot to do with expectations, a lot to do with talking out your characters, because I don't know, your guys, it sounds like your group is a little different, but both of my groups, when we get there's 1 or 2 people that already have ideas of characters. The rest of them are open books. They have really no idea. Like last night in the Monster Hunters Club game, you pick archetypes in that game. There's 25 of them in the book. People came, including myself. I came there. I said, well, I have 5 of them I like. I don't know which one I'm going to play, but I want to see what everybody else is doing. So yeah, it's a lot to do with expectations and talking out characters. And, people are busy. They don't have too much time to look over this stuff. But when you sit people down for a 3-4 hour session, this is their time. They're going to concentrate, making that character,
So when we have sessions like that and people make characters, what I found usually is everybody makes their own character in silence, and for about 30 minutes you don't hear a word, and then someone will say, is there anybody playing a X, or does anybody have this skill, or things like that? But otherwise it's pretty silent, to the point where I don't know. I like the idea of making characters as a group because you want them to gel. But unless me as a GM, I kind of look over their character sheet while they're doing it and kind of, overview all that stuff, they're not really going to be concerned about these conflicts. So how do you keep players engaged in there? Is it just a GM's job to make sure everything gels, or players also should be kind of proactive and interactive and all that?
But Ellen, if she has an idea.
Definitely. I've never had a problem keeping the players engaged, usually because I think for our podcast, it was within like a week and a half from me asking people to be a part of it to when we started playing. So it was quick. Everybody was fresh into the idea and very excited about the idea. So I think that helps a lot. I will say my session zeros, maybe the boring part, as you consider it, is maybe an hour max. We come to the table with characters probably like 95% built before we do the session zero. So the expectation is you have an idea. You've already talked to me about background, about who your character is. Like I have a handout that I send to my players, and I ask for friends and family, at least one ally, at least one enemy, something the character's seeking, greatest fear, major character traits and flaws, and then questions for me about your backstory. Because I like to get the players thinking like, oh, I left this open for you to play with as the GM. This is my question about it. And that way you can kind of get the point of view that the player is coming to their character from. So I think that a big part of it is just timing and the questions you ask and what you want them to bring to the table. I don't think that just sitting there making characters together is necessarily the best use of time. Although Carl's right, people are busy. And if you do carve out that space for that time, it can be really useful to people who might not otherwise have the time to do it in their everyday lives.
Yeah. You mentioned something good there, the lead in questions, and Carl talked about that before on the show too.
Yeah.
And I see he's got some stuff there on in his notes, something that he's learned at seminars and stuff. Tell us about that, Carl.
Yeah, it's very similar to what Ellen just said, that I went to a seminar at Gen Con. At least from my memory, that's where this came from. It could have been something else, but I'm pretty sure it was a seminar at Gen Con where this guy talked about character creation and backstories and stuff like that. And one of the workshops that we did was he had a thing called 3x3x3, and it was, you give this to the players, just like what Ellen said. And it's like a worksheet that says, okay, give me 3 friends, 3 acquaintances, and 3 rivals or enemies. And the players would fill these out and build up their character that way. These are the people I know, and it gives the GM that many NPCs per player. So I've whittled it down to just 1 each because that's a lot. So I just want from my players, like, give me 1 friend, 1 connection, and 1 rival. And boom, if you have 6 players, that's what, 18 NPCs. That's a lot. You know, I mean, that's a lot to work with. And when you deal with Savage Worlds, a lot of the settings have plot points and one sheets and Savage Tales. And you could take those NPCs that they give you and swap them out with the ones that the book gives you. So automatically, now instead of John Smith that the book says turns into a werewolf, now it's their, friend NPC. Boom, instant lock into the story. And, it doesn't matter if you don't use that character's name. It's what happens at the table for your players,
Yeah, I see what you're doing. I love that stuff. To me, it's like using that information against the players and their characters. And
it's not always bad.
no, but let me just play devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
For those players that don't want to feed anything to the GM, so they use it against them. Basically, the murder hobo that doesn't have a family, doesn't care for anything, and you can't really reach that character well. So how would you convince a player to buy into this? That, I mean, basically it's just a player that's how he is, and he doesn't want you to use anything against him. But I think there's value in making the game a lot more interesting that way and a lot more personal. So maybe it's not a fair question to you guys, but I just want to hear what you might say to that player to buy in and actually do it.
Well, I had one player kind of like that, where he wasn't really buying into anything, and he was just like kind of a blank slate. And I just put NPCs in the game that try to interact with them. If they don't reciprocate, I mean, there's only so much you could do. And maybe what happened was another player picked that up and went along with it. They said, "Hey, what are you doing? This person is like in trouble, and you're just like totally ignoring them." And it's like, I don't care. But it still worked within the group because another player picked it up. But there has to be some sort of buy-in from your players. And I mean, it just has to work. You can't force them to do anything that they don't want to.
Do you think that when a player sees another player interact with those NPCs and the spotlight being on them more because of that might make them feel jealous a little bit and might want to try it out next time?
Yeah, like they can learn by watching, the other players. Like, oh, well, they got a cool story out of this. Maybe I should reciprocate a little bit. Have you ever had a player like that, Ellen? That just was like,
I've never had a player like that, but I have played with a player like that, and so I think that is a situation where you have like a gentle nudge, like a one-on-one conversation with the GM, like, hey. If you buy in a little more and you put a little bit more of yourself and your character into the story, you'll get more out of it. And so you can frame it like that instead of, I was looking up a tool called Knife Theory. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. It came up with 5e first, but it could work for any game. And the idea is, you have a certain number, you have your, it's similar to the background document that I make and what you make as well, Carl. You have a certain number of knives for each character, and it can be, that's what they call them. It can be, a person you care about, a phobia or trauma, a mystery, an enemy, something like that, a favorite heirloom, a secret that you're keeping. And the idea about calling them knives is you can either take that backstory and stab the player with it, like Eric was suggesting, or you can hand it over to the player, and that's a weapon in their arsenal that they can use against the story or with the story. That's cool. And I'll share that with you guys.
I like that. That's pretty cool.
Thanks. Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Something I like to do too a little bit, and looks like Carl's doing it, and it helps really give a theme and not the genre, but using how you rate the game. What's that, Carl?
Yeah, I like to, because everybody understands movie ratings, so I kind of rate my games, and I tell them this up front. These are the expectations you need to talk about during this time. Either you do it texting before, or when you hammer it home when you get to that session 0, where people show up, and I say, okay, this is going to be Deadlands, and I did this with my Deadlands game last year. This is going to be Deadlands, but it's going to be like a hard R. We're going to go, and that's not meaning, oh, there's going to be sex and language. It mostly, I tell them it's probably going to be violence. It's going to be, I want this Deadlands to be horrific. I want this game, this specific Deadlands games to be pretty like horror driven. And there's going to be some really tough things in here. And I just want to make sure everybody's okay with that. Just tell me, what your boundaries are. And someone was like, no violence against kids. I'm like, perfect, fine, no problem. But that's where I set the expectations. Like my Ghostbusters game was strictly just PG-13. It's going to be goofy, fun, campy, comedy, horror. Nobody's really going to die. It's just going to be a fun session that we're just going to laugh and tell jokes and a little bit of horror mixed in, but it's not going to be like my Deadlands game where people are dying. And I had a player, his character died like on a second session and came back as harrowed. And it was pretty frightening for everybody because they were really into it. It was great, but it was a hard R,
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm going to steal that. Movie ratings, you're right. Everybody does understand them.
Yeah.
So I kind of set expectations in the same way, but I never couched it with that movie rating. But that's a great way to have everyone on board and understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's like an instant thing that I think everybody just clicks,
Is there a checklist that you come in with for your session 0? So, because you probably need to know when, okay, now we're ready. Now I've gone through everything I want to go through for this session 0, and now we're ready to go.
For me, with the Savage Worlds games I run, there definitely is a checklist. I will write notes and just bullet point it out. Like, okay, we're going to talk about the setting. I mean, that's the first thing that everybody wants to know about, and that's what we did in my last 2 session 0s that I didn't run. They did the same thing. They're like, okay, here's the setting. Here's where we're playing. You want to get that right out in the open. And then the expectations of like what kind of rating we're doing or what this is going to be like, and maybe what kind of characters and stuff like that. And especially with Savage Worlds, you want to talk about setting rules. That's like an important thing in the game. Like Monster Hunter's Club last night is Heroes Never Die, because we're all playing kids and teens and stuff like that. So that's a built-in setting rule that nobody knew really about it until the GM was telling us. So you have to go through those lists, especially with like Savage Worlds. What about you, Ellen? Did you do something similar?
For the first half of the session 0, I just kind of have like basic bullet points of what I want to cover. But the real meat and I hope you can't hear my dog in the background downstairs.
It's all right.
That's okay.
We all have dogs.
Yeah.
But the real meat and potatoes of it for me is that play session 0, where I split the party in 2. I had 2 characters in one session 0 and 2 characters in another. And they're 2 separate episodes of our podcast, which I do and I don't encourage people to listen to because they're a little rougher than the rest of the podcast because the plot is not there, Mm-hmm. I introduce both sides of the party separately to like minuscule parts of the major plot that will come, but they're not really prepared for it yet. So I, make up NPCs that in this case, both groups were traveling in different caravans across the desert. So it was what happens on your caravan trip on the way to the starting city. Mm-hmm. And so I had like 1 encounter per party. And basically I just wanted those sets of 2 players to interact with each other and get a feel for each other as players and a feel for their characters and for the other character involved. So that was the big part for me. That's, I guess for some people that's getting a little into like session 1 territory, but I just wanted to keep it kind of light and more rules based, like getting used to Savage Worlds. So that's why I felt like it was really important to have that like active session 0 as opposed to one where you're just making characters and setting expectations and stuff like that.
That's the cool idea. I like the starting playing, and especially for new players, because the one group I have, they're kind of green, they're kind of new, and they're still experiencing. I've never played a gadget. I want to never play Weird Scientist before. Let me try that. So yeah, that's a cool idea. Mm-hmm. I like that.
Yeah, Kyle just mentioned, especially for Savage Worlds setting rules, do you feel like Savage Worlds require a little bit different things too, besides just setting rules to address in the. Well, even Ellen mentioned players not knowing the rules all that well, so you might want to run a little bit of a demo like she does, but
Right.
just to get used to rolling dice and how the game works. So is there anything else besides those two you think that Savage Worlds does differently for session zeros?
Can you think of anything? I'm trying to think what my last two session zeros we did, and I can't think of anything that's specific more to Savage Worlds except setting rules and maybe explaining some of the the arcane backgrounds and stuff like that.
I will say the major thing that's different, like all of my players had played 5e before. And the major difference between that and Savage Worlds is no hit points, is the wound system. So that was something that I did hit on in session 0 to explain how it works, what the difference is between a wild card and an extra, and how just potentially deadly the game could be compared to when you have a giant pool of hit points. Because I've had instances while we were playing where, characters get almost one shot and then they're bleeding out and they have to be rolling vigor rolls and stuff like that.
They think that because they're big heroes that the peasant with the crossbow aimed at their head's not going to do anything, just a little d6 damage, and then they're going to walk off. But it's not how it works. It's a different mentality. All depends, like you said, which system you're coming from and what you're used to. And but even with the setting rules, that can change how lethal the game is quite a bit too. So there's no danger of dying really in Monster Hunters Club. You're going to end up at the hospital for a couple weeks, but that's about it.
Yeah,
which can be a bummer too when you're playing. You're not dead, but you're at -3 for sessions and sessions and sessions. So
right.
All right. Well, I think we covered pretty much everything. Like I said, for me, it's most of it is taken care of offline with text messages and emails and groups and stuff like that, and answering questions. I know I like to, if it's because recently for the Deadlands game, how I did it with mine was basically ask people if they wanted a dedicated session where they could make characters together, and they said, no, we're good. We're just going to make our characters and hand it over. Then I looked at that, and then because in the group you could see, okay, I made a huckster and I made, a blessed. So everybody knew what everybody was playing. Some people wait till the last because they want to fill in a certain role within the group. And then I just session 1 I took maybe 5-10 minutes that it was kind of a session 0 where I said, okay, this is how I run games. I don't like too much downtime, and I like things to keep moving. And because we had people from different ethnic backgrounds in our group, I mean, we got a Brazilian, we got Native American Indian, we got me, French Canadian. There's another Canadian, there's an American. So you got everybody, and you play Weird West, and there might be Indians in there. So I'm like, okay, so if I do something or say something that's offensive to you, we're all adults, just speak up, and I'll rectify my aim a little bit and try to be more sensitive. But and everybody was cool with that, and it's about being open about it, and like I said, we're here to have fun. You guys work hard. You work your 40 hours a week and more, and we do this for fun. I'm not trying to be, edgy as a GM. It's just beer and pretzel, basically. Let's just have fun, and so I don't want anybody to be offended by anything. Not that it's my style, but I think it's good. And there are other people that use some tools, like X guards and stuff like that. I don't personally think it's needed for my group playing with friends, but that's something to consider for your group if you think that's necessary too, especially with strangers or at conventions and stuff like that. But
so you kind of do a session 0, but it's just like a few minutes before your very first.
It's just very informal. Yeah, it's just very informal, and that's all.
Yeah.
So that's why I wanted to ask you guys how you do it, because some people, it's very formal. We're actually going to sit down for a few hours and go through all that and a checklist and all that. And for me, it's just, I just feel like with all the technology we have these days and how little time we have for gaming, that to actually spend one session doing that is kind of a waste of time when I can do most of it offline with groups and text and all that. It's not that I don't want to do any of that stuff.
Right.
I love it. I think it's fun. And for a lot of groups, the character making session is the most fun. So
I had a blast last night making my character. And when I made my character, because I came there with 5 ideas, I had no idea what I wanted to do. But as I saw people started like, okay, I'm going to play this, I'm going to play this, I was like, I was kind of bouncing ideas off of them, and we were talking stuff over. I'm like, that's cool, because now I'm thinking of a different way I can make this character because of what, player A or player B is playing now, so it's really cool to get a back and forth and stuff like that. And the session 0 2 weeks ago, it was definitely like that, because we're all we're playing teenagers in that game. Teen superheroes in the 70s. And we were just bouncing ideas off each other. Yeah, and your guy's doing this, and your guy is, buying weed off of my guy and stuff like that. It's the 70s. So no, it was great. And we couldn't do that on text. And it was a little bit difficult. It would take some time and stuff. But right there instantly, when we're making characters right in front of each other, those ideas can start flowing and stuff like that, It was fun.
I'm about to start the After game for Savage Worlds, that post-apocalyptic one, and it was funny because I just got the idea for my character from a GIF, and it's a goat playing the guitar, and so I'm a mind bender, which is like a psionic, but I played a banjo, and I'm also kind of a bard and laid back, and I chew on fabric and stuff, and I can, if I get surprised, I faint and things like that. So I'm really excited about that character. And then another player in the group, she's playing a mind bender as well, so we were going back and forth a little bit because we didn't want our concepts to be too similar. And she's like, no, I'm kind of a librarian and my powers are different. So I'm like, okay, so we're both kind of artsy hippie type of mind benders, but there's no overlap there. So
right.
Yeah, I agree. It can make it fun. You get hyped before the game instead of just sitting down, and sometimes it's hard to get traction.
Yeah.
So what I'm getting out of this is that, session 0 doesn't have to be really formal or very elaborate.
Right.
But there's definitely should be some discussions there. And I think the more there is and the more interaction between the players and their character creation process goes on, the better it might be. There's a potential there for making it more fun for everybody. So
yeah,
I hope that all the tips that Carl and Ellen shared with you guys, and we're also going to add the that thing that Ellen was talking about, Knife Theory. I got that in the show notes, and we'll have that for everybody. You can check it out and see if that helps you make your session and the campaign better, really, because it sets the tone for the rest of the campaign. You want to start on the right foot. And so, all right, let's wrap this up. While Die Harder, I know last episode we said it was going to be September 1st, but there were things that conspired against us running that episode on that date. So the new date is Tuesday, September 8th at 9 p.m. We hope that this Wild Die Harder turns into a monthly gathering of savages. People, you just drop in there, the chat, you can chat with us, but we still have a topic for that episode. We're going to show our setups. So, the cards that we use and the bennies that we use, and especially with Carl, what he transports all his props and terrain in, and how he gets all organized and packaged, and maybe show more. I know we got for the Patreons, we got this people can't see it now, but you'll be able to see it Tuesday. I made this Wild Die conviction token thing with my 3D printer. So
very cool.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's really neat.
One of our patrons, Vay, she designed this, so it's really, really cool. And so we'll show all that stuff and hopefully interact with you guys, with listeners, and hang out, have some fun on a Tuesday evening where you have nothing to do. 9:00 Eastern, the kids are probably in bed, or if you're Pacific time, you're eating dinner, so you can come eat dinner with us. So check us out. Also, people, you probably want a free adventure, right? And a free Shane Hensley adventure. Well, Savage Mojo is offering that if you sign up for their newsletter. They're about to kick off a Kickstarter campaign for their suzerain setting, the meta setting. And you can also get the core book as a pay what you want for a limited time for this until I think once the Kickstarter starts, it may not be pay what you want anymore. So go check that out. Speaking of Kickstarters, we got a Kickstarter going on right now, New Bristol. This is a super setting. It's basically a city for your supers. And in case you're worried about the Superpowers Companion 3 that's been announced and that we don't know when it's going to come out, I talked to the guys over there, and they assured me that they were going to update it to whatever Superpowers Companion, to whenever it's released and all that. So no compatibility issues there, conflicts whatsoever. Check them out. Tell us about your podcast, Ellen. What's going on with that?
Sure.
Why should we listen?
Why should you listen?
Yes.
Because it's fun.
Yeah.
Because you like Savage World. It's the story of 4 adventurers who went to a desert city to hear about their futures, their separate futures, and met a cult instead. And so things have spiraled off from there. It is Savage World's fantasy. It is homebrew. It is wacky. It is fun. And sometimes people get very close to death.
No death yet.
We are far ahead of where we're like 6 months ahead recording where the episodes are actually dropping. So no spoilers, but every Monday we drop a new episode, and you can find us on Twitter at Birdhouse Myst, MYST. And you can find me on Twitter too if you want.
Awesome.
Ellen _Dalina.
Yeah, she's quite active. She tweets, tweet like birds.
Yep. It's how you make friends.
Yeah, it's true. And that's how you get people to play Savage Worlds too. Very nice.
It's awesome.
And the other show you're in, that one you don't run it, but you're a player in it. And I watched a little bit of while I was there live for the first episode, and you guys had quite a big turnout. So it's gonna be exciting. What is that one about?
It is Savage Ravenloft. So the Ravenloft setting we have stolen to use with Savage Worlds, and meets Rippers. Nice. So yeah, it's quite a few concepts together. But if you like gothic horror, if you like vampires, if you like Rippers, come join us every other Wednesday on twitch.tv/CFTRPG. Mm-hmm. Nice. And starts at 9 Eastern. So we will be playing this upcoming Wednesday, whatever that date is, the 9th.
Nice. So the day after our debut. So.
Mm-hmm.
That's a perfect mix there, Ravenloft and Rippers. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, and yeah, like I said, Night Theory is going to be in the show notes. What about you, Carl? You got anything to plug this time? Usually every episode you got a new product out. Not yet.
Nothing from Doghouse. Just Monster Hunters Club. Like I mentioned earlier, we're playing that. The digital version is out to the backers. Character sheets are out. They're working on getting some adventures out, some one-shots. But it does have a plot point in the digital for the backers. And the book just went to print. So we're just sending it off to get the first proof. And then we're going to look at the proofs and make sure everything's cool. And then, get that going. So
then it's going to go live on drive-thru for everybody, right?
Yeah. It's going to take some time to get that first proof because of COVID stuff. Drive-thru already said that it's taking a lot more time to get proofs back. So, but the proof is out and it's sent, so we're just waiting on it to come back. So,
this is Eric saying, "Hope you're having fun, Gary. We miss you, and we'll see you later."
This is Carl saying, "Do you want to Benny that?"
All right. Well, Ellen, thank you so much for coming. You were great. Much appreciated all the input you had there.
For sure.
Thank you for having me.
All the poise. Hopefully, we get to hang out more again. Maybe play some games together. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, everybody. See you later. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Wild Eye Podcast. If you would like to get in touch with us, our email address is thewildeye@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and now Twitch. We also have a Patreon at www.patreon.com/thewildeye. The Wild Eye Podcast would like to thank the following patrons: Uncle J. Raz, Rob Towell, Conrad Erasmus Neubert, Corey Judd, Emma Wakeland, Kevin Stanley, Perry Chalmers, Ray Aracia, Dan Brown, Yan Jetmar, Manuel Sams, Mr. Stagg, Zovia RPG Maps, Chris Grant, Robert Dorgan, Andy Hall, Brian Kaser, Darrow Katsier, Jans Karnheim, Patrick Greenlaw, Sid the Squid, the Digital Dungeon Master, Knuckle Dave Anderson, and Tori Bjertnes Peterson. Thank you. We'll see you later.